So I'm like trying to get my breath, saying I'm okay. And it's only when I try to sit up, that's when I sort of realise, hang on a minute, I can't feel my legs.
I'm Sonya Morton Firth and you're tuned in to the Sonya Morton Firth Show. Paralysed from the waist down. Today my guest is Jason Anker MBE.
And then he just paused, and it seemed like an eternity, and you could see him trying to of what to say, and he just said, "You'll never walk again."
Jason, thank you so much for being a guest on my show.
You're more than welcome. It's supposed to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Jason, ever since we met a few months ago now, doesn't time fly?
Yeah, absolutely. Last March,
Yeah, it was March at Mark's event. I've been dying to get you on my show and I've been really, really looking forward to this. So, but before we start, I would love to get a bit more of your background before the accident happened and where you were mentally before that day.
My stepdad brought me up, and I regard him as my dad. So didn't ever miss anything out as a child. You know, I saw my real dad, so I can't say there was any actual trauma in my early years. We lived for 5 years. Mum and Dad ran a pub, so I lived upstairs in a pub. So I had great teenage years. You know, always alcohol for the parties with my friends, them sort of things. And then things started to go slightly wrong for me when I was about 15. We moved, not a great year to move, doing the exams. We moved to Sheffield, and I started to go off the rails a little bit, and I didn't really achieve much at school and missed my exams. I was expected to do quite well. I had sort of failed all my exams. But my big passion in life was art. I was very artistic, and I managed to get my qualifications, I passed that okay. And I always wanted to be a sign writer. It was just my dream job to do. And I was very fortunate to get an apprenticeship, and the company I worked for made replica vehicles, 1920 replica vehicles, and we did delivery on the vehicles. And we worked for them, did loads of work for Harrods, and did some amazing projects. It was a great company. I always say that it wasn't necessarily the best paid job in the world, but I loved it.
And that's a miserable thing, isn't it?
Virtually never had a day off, and did the usual guy thing, ended up with a girl. It wasn't really a proper relationship, sort of very, very casual. But she got pregnant when she was 19. So obviously a bit of pressure from the families, and ended up getting married. I don't think particularly either of us wanted to, but we just did.
You thought you were doing the right thing.
Doing the right thing. I was 21, 22, and you realise you've got no money. All your money you earn goes into bills. So life wasn't particularly very good. But I still had my job. My job was sort of the saving thing. By this time, we got 2 children. But in a pretty poor relationship, not wanting to go out with your friends. I wasn't socialising as much. I'd stopped playing football with my friends, stopped going to a football. I was a big Forest fan at the time, couldn't afford to get the season tickets. So the marriage was really going down now.
Do you remember where you were in terms of your mental state of mind the day of the accident?
I do now. At the time I didn't. I just know I was really, really unhappy, and I thought that's what it was. So I was very, very distracted. I ended up working in jobs I didn't want to do, just to try and provide for the family. So the year before my accident, I was working in jobs on building sites, on power stations. Some jobs actually paying quite a lot of money, but I was still dreadfully unhappy. So at this point, marriage was in crisis. I was drinking far too much. We got a lot of debt. So it was just literally surviving from week to week. I probably started the night before my accident. I was at a party. And I was actually with my supervisor who I worked with, and he suggested we go home because we got work in the morning. Again, not really as at the time, but because my poor state of mind at the time and all the pressure I was under, I stayed out. And I can't remember going home, but I can remember being picked up the next day. And my first instinct was I couldn't go to work. I was hungover. There's no way I could work on a building site. But next thing is a bang on the door. The supervisor, so I decided that I might as well go in. Slept on the way on the back seat of the car, so I was hungover. And you get to work, and it was freezing cold. It was actually the first day back after the Christmas holidays. So in a job I didn't want to do, hungover, with marriage problems, with debt issues, totally unaware, just thought, you haven't got no options, this is your life, this is what you're going to have to do.
So what happened?
On the day itself, it was like I say, it was a really cold, foggy, icy day. We was actually repairing a flat roof. And then around 2:30 in the afternoon, a rush job came in. We had to go and work on a different part of the building. Last job of the day, time pressures against us. And unfortunately, I fell from a ladder, fell 10 feet. Yeah.
And were you conscious when you fell, or were you knocked unconscious?
People often say they can remember themselves falling, everything's in slow motion. It wasn't for me. I felt that I slipped, unless I've regressed in memory. I can remember feeling that I slip, and the next thing I was on the ground, just looking up. And
can you remember what was going through your mind?
Yeah, because at the time I was really, really winded, or I thought I was winded. So I'm like trying to get my breath, saying I'm okay. And it's only when I try to sit up, that's when I sort of realise, hang on a minute, I can't feel my legs. So it's just like, well, terror, everything you can imagine, just panic.
Did all of that at that time go through your mind? Did you think, oh my gosh, this is it, I can't?
You do, you panic straight away. But then, because of human nature, no, I'll be all right. It'd be fine. Even though I was trapped between two buildings, the ambulance was called, they couldn't move me because they suspected a spinal injury, so the protocol is don't move. But I was getting cold, I was shivering, so after about an hour of to and fro what I was going to do, we just said, no, we need to get him to hospital. He's going, and then I was transferred to a local hospital. Initially went for an X-ray, so still in sort of disbelief, and everyone around you sort of telling you to calm down. And then I can remember being taken to a room to wait for results of the X-ray, and the doctor walked in the room. And I always remember it, as he walked through the door, he had a big smile on his face. So,
well, presumably you thought everything was okay.
So as he's walked towards me with this big smile, of course it was going to be okay. These things don't happen to you, they always happen to other people. And he basically said that I was suffering from a condition called spinal shock. And he expected my sensation to come back within the next hour, couple of hours, couple of days, even a few weeks. It could be a long process, but everything was going to be okay. So obviously relief.
Gosh, okay.
And then just as a side comment, he just said, oh, maybe it'd be a good idea to send you for a CT scan, just for a closer look, just to make sure that we've not missed anything, but it's just routine. So got sent for a CT scan, got put back in a room, again waiting for him to come in. Wife was sat on the side, we was chatting, talking about maybe she'd look at things slightly differently now, and our life was going to be different. And then the door opened, and he walked in, and he wasn't smiling. So he didn't have to say anything to me. I knew in that instant that, as he's walking towards me, and he sat at the side of the bed, and I thought,
And what can you remember now?
Yeah, vividly. I can, a lot of that early memories, he's been pieced together, I must admit, but by memories, what people have said. But I can remember what he said to me. He just said, we have found a small fracture in your back. And he spoke so slowly, like he was waiting on every word for him to come out. And you could tell he was struggling. And then he said, we have found huge spinal injuries. And then he just paused. It seemed like an eternity. And you could see him trying to, of what to say. And he just said, you'll never walk again. And with that, he stood up and just walked out of the room. And that was it. And he walked out, and you were still like, has he just said that? And like, you was trying to figure out, no, but yeah.
Did it sink in?
No, not so. No, I still didn't believe it. I went for an operation the next day, and they put 2 steel rods into my back, or titanium rods in my back to stabilise my spine. And then I was sent to a spinal unit in Sheffield. a spinal rehabilitation centre. And I was still convinced that's where you go to learn to walk.
Yes.
Because that's what you see on the movies and in TV. You go to these places and you try really, really hard, and you have this miracle.
And
breakthrough.
I can see them.
Yeah.
You've got 2 bars
Two
there,
bars
and
and
you're walking a lot.
because it's all you ever see. You never hear the stories of people who don't get better. It's always the people. The one. I think there was one young guy in there who walked out. Everybody else in there had suffered life-changing injuries.
Had they given you any sort of hope, or sort of said, "Oh, it
They
may change"?
In a way, it's not their fault. They give you false hope because every spinal injury, like a brain injury, is different, and no one is the same. So they don't 100% know how bad these injuries are, and they then say to you, after about 2 years, whatever you are left with is probably what you're going to have for the rest of your life. But then you hear these stories of people who've suddenly got a feeling back after a year or so. So you're still in this place where it is going to be okay. But I always remember the doctors telling me it would be life-changing forever, and yet the tea lady who used to come around every day, she had a feeling I was going to be okay. So I just think I used to believe the experts or the tea lady. She had a feeling, but yeah, it was really bad. It was. I didn't get on with the hospital environment was unique in a way that everyone there accepted people in wheelchairs. You got injured patients, and all the staff just accepted, and all the hospital was like all on a flat surface. So you got quite accustomed to being in a safe environment. And it was only later in your rehabilitation where they encouraged you to go out. So my friends used to come over, pick me up and take me out to the pub for a few pints. Then you start experiencing steps. Then you start experiencing no toilet facilities. So the enormity of what you're going to go through.
How did it affect you both physically and mentally?
Again, because it was 29 years ago, even back then the hospitals didn't really talk about your mental state. There was a counsellor in there who was more there to tell you what benefits you could claim and make sure you'd be okay. Your house was adapted and things like this, but mentally it was very little. I think you could get a sleeping tablet if you couldn't sleep and stuff like that. It was really, really bad, but solely geared up for your physical rehabilitation. And that's what it was all about. We was introduced to sport to try and give out focus, but I'd see other patients sort of getting involved with basketball and these other sports, and I didn't. I thought, this won't make me feel better. And that realisation that marriage was in such massive problems before my accident, so I was convinced it was over straight away.
And how did your marriage fare after that?
I came out of hospital for 1 day. I got released on April 25th, 1993, and she left the next day.
She left the next day?
The next day with the kids, 2 young children,
So not only were you paralysed, couldn't use your legs, you were in a home that presumably wasn't necessarily adapted
at that time, no. We had no money, we was in a council house, it was totally unadapted.
And then your wife leaves you the next day. How did you cope, Jason?
I didn't, but because of my personality, I didn't like expressing I was struggling. So you put on this brave face, and the only way I could do it was by drinking.
Did you have mum, dad, friends?
Yeah, honestly, family was there. Family was always there, massively. I would never have got through this without my family. Mum and dad was amazing. My sister was just fantastic, and people right around. But again, people, apart from the parents, obviously just trying to help by giving me things and trying to make sure that way. And then friends not knowing what to say was take down the pub and get you drunk because they don't know what to say. And they was all struggling themselves. It was a tight group of friends, and they didn't know what to say for the best anyway.
So how were you feeling with all of this?
Very low, but then very unable to express how bad I was feeling. So by me going out a lot and getting drunk, putting on that brave face, you'd be laughing, be joking. I'd be falling out of my wheelchair, laughing about it, and I was out all the time. I lost everything. My marriage, I don't mean it in a wrong way, but that wasn't like the biggest thing that went wrong in my life. It was me losing my kids. At the time, Abby was 3, Sam was 5 months old.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So it was just.
Could you see them?
Yeah, I saw Abby. I mean, I was always close to Abby. She was 3, so she was sort of manageable. And then my ex-wife, I used to see my kids quite a lot. So Abby used to come and stop Monday to Thursday. And so I'd stay in the house with Abby, and she'd be there for 3 nights. But then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'd just be partying out, drinking all night, you know what I mean, just completely off the rails and not knowing how to cope, you know. And back then, mental health support was a counsellor and some antidepressants. He was chat about my past and what, you know, I need to book my ideas up and there's hope and all this. It wasn't great counselling.
Were you angry?
Extremely, with everything, with everybody and everything.
Who did you blame? Was there times?
Yeah, I lashed out. I blamed everybody. You know, I blamed everybody. I even blamed myself quite a lot as well. So not only blaming other people, you got that self-resentment because you blame yourself for you ruined everything. You ruined. I saw no future whatsoever at all of getting out of this.
I mean, this was, what, 26 years?
29.
29 years. I mean, in that period, as I understand it, it took you the good part of 26 years to start to being where you are. You've got an MBE, and we'll come on to talk about that. What was that journey like, those 26 years?
It's been horrific. I can't put it into words. It's been absolutely horrific, you know. And you know, I managed to find a way of coping. Initially, drugs, drink, anything that would make me cope, I'd go down that route, and I justified it by I was coping.
Didn't the drugs and the drink make it worse? I mean, I know obviously initially it would make it better, but it's
yeah. But I think when when I got into the rave scene, obviously I was well into my sports, football, you know, and obviously you can't play football no more. So that friend group, even though they want to be there for you, you know, you're stopping them doing the things that they want to do. So I broke away from that chain of friends and got into the wrong crowd. And then when I started going onto the racing, it was just like, first time being accepted anyway. It felt incredible.
Do you remember that first time, that feeling of taking your first E?
Yeah. You can imagine someone at absolute rock bottom, didn't really want to be on this planet anymore, was too terrified of committing suicide, but knew I had nothing to give, nowhere to go. And then taking that pill, and 50 minutes later, for the first time thinking that I can actually do this, I have got something to do. And yeah, it was incredible. But I could never get that feeling ever again. It was only the first time. It was that lift, but I just didn't think I could ever get to them heights ever again. So that became quite destructive then, because I was always chasing that feeling again.
Did you reach a low point that you thought, right, that's it?
Yeah, I think what the phrase is called. I wasn't suicidal, but I just didn't care if I lived or died at that moment. So I was very reckless with some of the choices I was making, because I just didn't care. But I felt so guilty about leaving behind my kids.
Did you ever wish you hadn't survived?
Yeah. It lasted a lot of time, a long time. You know, why was I spared? You know, why couldn't I just had an accident and died, and that would have been it. Especially when I could see the trauma it was causing my family as well. So it was like it would have been better off for everybody if I'd not sort of survived.
And didn't you end up in hospital again?
Yeah, 2 years after my introduction to ecstasy, I was one of the people it had an adverse effect to. I was rushed into hospital in February of '95. I think we went out to a club in Sheffield on a bus trip, someone's birthday. We got in the club. Someone got some different pills we'd not been taken before, a lot cheaper than what we'd been paying for them as well. So the warning signs were there anyway. I was drunk anyway. I decided I wasn't going. I was drunk, got picked up, got to this club, and it was instant. I started hallucinating straight away. I just knew something was odd. And I talked to some of my friends who was there, so yeah, we're not having a great time with these pills, there's something not quite right. And that's all I can remember. And the next thing I woke up, I was in hospital. I think it was like 17, 18 days later.
Oh my gosh, so you were out for 17 or 18 days?
They suspected serious brain damage. I was put onto a life support machine, put onto an incubator. Mum and Dad was told after day 15 that I wasn't going to survive. And if I did, I'd be severely brain damaged, and they was advised to turn the machine off. So it was just, yeah. I mean, I'm not party to any of this. Obviously, I can't say that was a traumatic part of my life because I was totally unaware it was happening.
But when you woke up and you were sort of told that, did you think that changed things?
Well, yes and no. I mean, at the time, the effects of the pills that had on my body, it's destroyed so much of me. My brain injury I've suffered. That's why I slur my words slightly. If you notice, I've got a slight slur to my words. Like I had a couple of drinks, and that's lasting.
I thought it was the vodka I put in your water.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So yes, I'm very susceptible to alcohol anyway. I lost use of the left-hand side of my body completely, so it was like having a stroke. And right arm I could hardly move, so you can imagine I'd already had an accident where I lost my legs, and now by self-inflicted, I'd lost the use of my arms as well. So I was 5 months in rehab. 5 months, literally, how to speak again, how to dress. I couldn't do anything. I was worse. I was definitely worse than what I did when I was in the first
care? And that sounds a very sort of flippant question.
Again, it was such a long journey. I mean, to see the trauma of my family again, going through all that, and then the guilt of not speaking up, and the guilt of my family not thinking they was there for me, and that they thought partly to blame because they knew something wasn't right. And I think that's it. I wasn't taking drugs and they didn't notice a change in me. They'd all noticed something wasn't right and not said anything. But we couldn't say anything because I'd fight my handle. If anybody had mentioned anything around me, my mood swings was that bad. I'd throw cans of beer across the room and shout and swear at people.
Now that doesn't seem like the Jason I'm sitting in front of today. So what was that switch that flicked?
It didn't switch for a long, long time. It didn't switch. I went back into counselling. I decided to actually give him a go instead of just thinking, nod your head and get the antidepressants. I may as well listen to what this guy has to say. And he came up with a concept of everything having an opposite. And he asked me what number I was today. Number 1 was suicide, and 10 was ecstasy. Where would you be? And he actually laughed to himself, so maybe I shouldn't say ecstasy, but 10's a really good place. And I used to say number 2, and he said, well, try and be a number 3 and all this, and everything's got an opposite. And I got stuck on number 5. I asked him the question, what's the opposite of 5?
Oh, very good.
Yeah, and he said, well, this isn't one, and so that's where I stayed. I thought I can just about cope with life being number 5. Nothing makes me really happy, but if I work really hard, I don't get sad.
Where are you now?
I flip. I'm happy to flip. I can flip daily. I'm happy to be. It's all right to have a bad day. I don't care some days if I'm a number 4 or a number 3. If I've just had, we get some bad news or a bit of stress. But I'm happy to some days I'm up to 7 or 8, even 9s. I'm in a good day. Because I think that's it. I was so terrified of slipping back. If I let myself get too happy with something, what if it went wrong? That's all I can think about. What if it goes wrong? What if I slip back and get down there again? So it's like being terrified of
what the repercussions?
The repercussions would be of opening up. So, and I stayed there for years. I stayed there for over 20 years, just coping, just nothing meant anything, like devoid of feelings. So I didn't get into relationships. I had a lot of drunken relationships, and again, I feel really ashamed. I've attracted a lot of people because I didn't care. When I was drunk, it's like the switch, and the brain injury I've got is when I get drunk, I switch.
Yeah.
It's like there's no limit. So sometimes I could have 2 drinks, I'd switch. Other times I could drink normally and be fine. So I go out some nights and I go, and when I've gone, I'm like a different person. I'm not using it as an excuse that I have no recollection whatsoever. Yeah. And then people tell me the next day what I did, or who was upset, and then the stupid affairs I used to have are just ridiculous. just really bad toxic relationships, often with people I knew that we've been in relationships with people I know the partners. And
Sounds to me like you're still beating yourself up, Jason.
a little bit, yeah. I'm on a journey at the moment. I'm helping myself at the moment. That's what I'm doing the last few years, which we'll get to. I have changed. But yeah, there's so much guilt I've labelled on myself that I can't let it go. It's like, so do you deserve a good life? But yeah, so even when life turned round, I started doing presenting, talking about speaking from 12 years ago, and life outwardly looked good, you know.
You've got an MBE, and I know you've done a lot of work in health and safety. Tell me a little bit about that. How did that make you feel? That's an amazing achievement.
So it started 12 years ago. I used to spend a lot of time with friends in Tenerife. I got compensation in 2007. So all of a sudden we got £400,000 in the bank. It was put in a trust fund, so it meant I could still play.
Can I just say that is absolutely, I think that's appalling.
Yeah, it was.
£400,000 for changing your life.
I waited 14 years for it as well. It was just like, it was so bad. It was so bad. I think my court fees were like £200,000 we took off that for me. Yeah, it was horrendous. But obviously it gave me a bit of financial security. But when all your friends are at work and you just nothing. I buy things. Nothing had any value to me. So I spent a lot of time over in Tenerife with friends over there. Even contemplated moving over there at one stage just to start again, escape, and not deal with what was going through my mind. I just had a fresh start somewhere, you know. But it didn't work out that way. And then I was in the UK at a Christmas party, contacted by somebody who just asked me a question while I was in a wheelchair. So I just sort of fell off the ladder, you know, the usual. But it was more interesting now. I need to talk to him. We arranged a meeting, and it turned out he needed safety. And he got my number from somebody, and blah, blah, blah. And long story short, he took me out onto a project he was working on. I sat at the back of the room and said, I can't do that. I can't present. I can't talk about people. I could barely talk about it to myself. So there was no way I could sit and talk about all my issues to somebody else. But then I did he put me on the spot on one of the jobs. I had to ramble through a story in about 5 minutes about my life, and somebody just said, "Oh, that's quite inspiring."
And how did that make you
feel?
It
made me feel amazing. Yeah, that's
so those words. That is so inspiring. You are so inspiring.
Yeah, it was all that thing that if I could then share what I'd been through to prevent someone else going through what I've been through, would that be appealing? And yeah. It had to be. There had to be something that came out of this. So that's how it started. It was a really slow talk, and it was always about reliving the accident, going over everything that happened that day, and you know, I was speaking sometimes like 4 times a day, and like reliving that story. It became really, really difficult.
Is it still difficult?
Not now. So I've dealt with that part of it. And I don't actually go when I present now. I don't linger on the accident. I just tell people what I did and move on. It's all about the consequences that choice I made that day at work and how it's affected my life over this time. And you mentioned the MBE, which I got in 2015. It was amazing. I can remember opening the letter. I thought it was some kind of court summons. You know, I got to be a juror. And I was so busy at work. I thought, I can't deal with this today. And then I opened the letter and I read it, and it was like, yeah. But because I was still quite in a bad place mentally, the day we went to the palace to receive it, my dad came and my daughter. I was made up for my dad. He was so proud that day. It was like, you know, all what he'd been through with me. To have his moment, it was amazing. But for me, nothing. Because I was still in that place, things don't matter. Don't get too excited about this. And so I didn't enjoy the day probably like I should have enjoyed it.
You weren't proud of yourself?
No, not stop. No. Even that didn't make up for what I put people through. In my mind.
Wow. So, Jason, how did you shift your mind?
It probably started 4 years ago. I'd already started speaking about doing I tried to use some wellbeing to my life, just another thing. I've skirted with so many things.
What sort of tools do you use?
Well, breathing. Obviously, I touched on Buddhism, but then I took a few things out of Buddhism and just applied to my daily life. So trying to be more grateful, practice a bit of gratitude. And
I love that. How do you practice gratitude?
Oh, that's it. That's why I wasn't working properly, so I was only practicing it. I was only sort of doing it. I think that's a good word when people say, I practice gratitude. So we're not doing it properly, you're only practicing it. You need to do it. And even now, I'm just getting my head around what it actually means to be grateful for things. It's not just words and make you feel good. It's actually really, really believing it and being grateful for every single moment. But that started because I was aware that in the safety world, well-being was started being talked about in the workplace. And I started looking at it and then making the connection between my accident and my well-being at the time of my accident. Was there some correlation why I did what I did? But then I was approached for the second time. I was approached early in my speaking career to write a book. And again, I didn't feel worthy of writing a book. I didn't think my story was relevant. It took a bit of persuasion. And I was introduced to someone, but again, I think I always find a reason why things happen. I don't believe things happen for a reason, but I always look for a reason why things happen. And I just made aware of an article by a lady who was helping a lot of females in the safety world write books. And I made contact with her, and by chance she lived quite locally to where I lived, and we had a few meetings and discussed what I wanted to do, and she'd help me. So I had a ghostwriter, but it really helped me because at the time there were so many things I locked in my brain. I don't think I'd have got them out without the help of the writer probing me to open some things. And it was a really difficult 6 months of my life. But I think by writing the book, what it did for me was, it's when I read it for the first time. That's when it clicked, and that's when for the first time I felt I'm going to have to change. And that was it. So, yeah.
So the Jason that I've got sitting in front of me here, how is he different to the Jason that went up that ladder?
I'm very different, and I'm different in a good way. I think I'm the best version of me I've been in probably all my life. I mean, my friends say to me, it's like having my mate back again, but I feel like I'm a better friend now than I was before. Because, in the few years before my accident, I'd always started slipping on this path of not caring about other people. And so I don't think I was a great person a couple of years prior to my accident, if I'm totally honest. But now I feel like I am, I feel like I'm more caring, definitely more caring about other people's feelings and, yeah, just a better friend in general, actually.
Jason, I can tell you are an amazing, amazing, amazing guy. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Remember, there's a new interview out every Monday, so hit subscribe and like, and you'll get it straight into your inbox.